Have you ever wondered what goes into the behind the scenes of art exhibitions, specifically group exhibitions? In the last month, I was lucky enough to be part of not one but two local group exhibitions in my area, coming from someone who spent the last 2 years painting in her bedroom. This was a massive change and incredibly eye-opening, so I wanted to share with you a little bit of behind the scenes of preparing for the Flame Arts exhibition. Hello, beautiful people. My name is Elena. My sign name is like a heart within me. I'm from Far North Queensland and I'm a mixed media oil painter. I'm also deaf, so sometimes I sign and my voice will be off and I'll have captions, and sometimes I talk. This last month I was lucky enough to take part in the Flame group exhibition here in Cairns at the Botanical Gardens in Cairns Far North. The Flame program I got into at the end of 2024. The program is made for youth in Cairns. I think it's between 17 or 18 to 25. We get to create and showcase our art alongside a group of very talented and amazing young artists. Part of the program is we have access to 4 mentors who sort of show us what it's like as working artists in the community. I especially got close with 2 of the mentors who introduced me to the world of pop art, and oh my goodness, I started my artwork earlier in January. We were meant to sort of start our work a few weeks later, but I was having issues with my wisdom teeth and thought I was going to be having emergency surgery, but because of my health, there actually wasn't a safe way for me to have surgery or go under anesthesia, so that got cancelled. By the time we did the excursion where we got to see their working studios, I absolutely fell in love with spray paint. I was like a kid in the lolly shop seeing all the spray paint on the walls. So I had already started my painting, and I was kind of disappointed because I'd spent so much time on this oil painting. It was in my normal style. I wasn't gonna bin it. Like, I was really excited for the concept, but I also really liked what I was learning about spray paint and pop art. That's when I found out we're allowed to submit more than just one artwork. I think one of the girls submitted like 7 artworks in total. I did 3. So I grabbed 2 wood cradled panels that were sort of homemade ones that I had lying around, and I decided to do something on deaf history. The start of the painting really wasn't that different from how I'd normally start one of my paintings. I love working with acrylics and acrylic inks to do like a really messy underlay that's sort of just free. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. One of the bases for the paintings I was so happy with, and the other one just made me want to cringe with how the colours sort of ended up muddying together, which happens. So the things that don't work just get covered up with other things, and I've experimented a little bit with spray paint. I've worked mainly with gold chrome spray paint, which I love. It is really fun to spray into acrylic inks when they're still wet, because the spray paint reacts with the inks and will sort of fleckle off, but it will also leave these really cool marks. But when the sun hits it, it's so bright and shiny, which I love. But I don't have a good history of spray paint. I got my first 2 cans and I actually killed both of them. So the first question that I asked Dan, also known as Wally, who was one of the mentors whose sort of specialty was spray paint, was, how do you keep your spray paint cans alive? He explained to me how to look after the spray paint cans. Mainly, you continually switch out the caps by stopping them from getting blocked, but also he showed me an incredible disability tool that I had no idea about. He was showing me sort of how to use the spray paint cans, and noticed that because of my condition I have a genetic connective tissue disorder, and I also have a lot of muscle wastage. So holding down my finger on the trigger of the spray paint can was really hard because my finger is just one, too bendy, but two, I don't have the muscle strength to keep the pressure there. He showed me this really cool tool, I'll link it down below if I can, that's sort of 3D printed and it sits just on top of the can and it allows you to only use a little bit of pressure. It's so much more easier to control. The only thing you have to watch out for is make sure that where the clamps are doesn't block where the spray comes out. So I sort of then went away and I combined my inspiration from Dan with his spray paint and from Jamie with the pop art, especially his paintings like about crazy ants, and sort of how it combined all these different aspects of them into the painting. And then with Tanya Albert, who has been a favourite artist of mine from when I first became interested in art years back, she does a lot of actual paper collage. She's got a very street art graphic style. Her portraits are primarily a lot of women, but it's really cool seeing the collage and patterns show through underneath. So I wanted to do that, but with deaf history, so I was able to find some newspaper articles on the Milan 1880. This is a topic I'm really passionate about because a lot of people aren't actually aware of it. I wasn't aware of it until I started learning more about deaf culture and deaf history. But sign language was banned from 1880 to 1980, which is 100 years from being taught in deaf schools. I think America might have been a little bit more lucky because I had Galway University. I don't fully understand the history in America, but I know in Australia, kids weren't allowed to learn sign language. Adults were no longer learning sign language, and there was entire generations that went without. I know my deaf teacher was born deaf, and she didn't learn sign language until she was 20, because that was when Auslan was reintroduced to the community as this entirely new thing. And I think it's very lucky that we had families. I don't know if it's primarily families with generational deafness or the full scope behind that, but those that signed behind closed doors during those 100 years is what kept the language alive and ensured that we still have Auslan today. I found some old school reports where schools used to be titled School of the Deaf and Dumb, and the actual illustrations of some of the schools. I also had from the actual, I think, book or file report that was written during the Milan 1880 meeting about oralism. So I sort of combined all of that into the base layer of collage with a few other bits on one of the paintings, and then the other one was sort of a little bit more of a free-for-all with different imagery, and it was more about thinking outside of the box and empowerment, and also some sheets from old sign language books that I had scanned showing how we learn sign language now. Part of the program included having access to a studio space that was set up in the back of Gallery 4 tanks. I wish I could have utilised this more. I ended up only being able to attend one of the working sessions. We had a month where we had a working session every Saturday, but with the heat in Far North Queensland and just with where my health was at, because we'd often have meetings the Friday night before with trying to understand an interpreter for an hour, 2 hours straight, I was exhausted and couldn't possibly get out the next day, but I did have one. It was really cool to see everyone sort of working on their own individual projects, specifically in what mediums that they were drawn to, because it really was quite vast. I knew I wanted to incorporate Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language, into my artwork. So I coordinated with the titles of the artworks to the signs that I used, which were better in future. I had to take my own reference photos and Photoshop them onto the source imagery, because it's not actually a natural thing to look up and find a whole bunch of really cool photos that I could work off the internet. I really hope this changes in the future, but regardless, I was really happy with how it turned out. I've been deaf 5 years this year, which is half a decade, which is insane to think about. Since I wasn't born deaf, I had full hearing up until I was 17. It was very eye-opening losing my hearing, and the biggest thing for me has been this constant tug-of-war between being understanding when I leave the house and interact with people and they're awkward or disrespectful or rude. That is likely their first time interacting with someone with hearing loss, or maybe they don't know how to handle disability, but also being aware that this is my, say, fifth interaction with someone in that 2 hour period that I've left the house that is like that, and it's really exhausting and disheartening and even alienating, because especially for myself, I know what it's like to be able to function as a hearing person, and all of those interactions being so easy to now being incredibly difficult and quite mentally and emotionally draining. So I did my best to highlight some of those attitudes and experiences, especially with better. And then it was time for the exhibition. We had a few prep days, so we had a sort of installation day where we'd come in and see our artworks being installed and sort of help. I did my best, but because of where the tanks are, there is no internet connection. Thus, my live transcription app doesn't work. So we had a few communication hiccups. My mum was doing her best to sign, but because we were signing maths and measurements, it was going right over both of our heads. Then we had one last meeting, which was sort of a wrap up for the program, and we got to sort of walk through everyone's art. I didn't realize we were going to have to explain our artworks to a group of people. Also didn't know that was optional until the person after me chose not to speak, and I was looking at my interpreter like, you didn't tell me that was an option. But regardless, it was really cool to sort of see it all come together, and everyone's artworks were so vast. It was amazing. And then we had the exhibition opening night. Now, one of the mentors, Jamie, wasn't able to make it, but I was beyond excited when we went to installation day because my artwork got put next to his. So I was really excited because he is a very talented pop artist. So it was an honor to have my first attempt at pop art hanging next to his. But also seeing Jamie, who's one of the mentors, his pop art and how he incorporated so much of like the local culture and things that make Cairns was really, really cool, because every time you look at his art, there's just so much more. Every time you think you've seen everything, there's a new layer and there's something else that you notice. The opening night was insane. There were so many people and it was so loud. My eyeballs were throbbing by the time we got home from being interpreted to for 3 hours straight, but it was an experience I definitely won't forget, and I definitely hope to do more things like this in the future after I have a very long rest. So yeah, that's a wrap on the 2025 Flame program. I'm so grateful I got to take part in it, even with all of the health hiccups and everything. It was really amazing to connect with the mentors and seeing people looking at my art, stopping, taking photos. I was freaking out the entire time and literally couldn't look at people looking at my art because it made me nervous. But it was really special and I was very grateful for the opportunity.